Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk TEFL podcast. So I'm Jackie, and joining me is Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I am good. It is so nice here in Vancouver. So today, we are talking about task-based teaching and learning. And as we were coming up with topic ideas for this episode, I realized that we had never actually talked or like done a full episode on task-based teaching, which surprised me. I know we've mentioned it a few times in other podcasts, but this is actually something that we could do like 10 episodes on if we needed to. So yeah, so let's jump into it. We'll do like, what is it? Why should you use it? How to plan a task-based lesson, and then kind of some of the classic activities that you might use for the style of lesson. So the first one is, what is task-based teaching? So just basically, students have to complete a task of some kind. It can be big, it can be small, but they just have to complete something. There's a large degree of flexibility for how to complete this task. So this is certainly not like when students, are doing a very controlled exercise in a workbook or something and just have to fill in the blanks with a very specific set of vocabulary. This is kind of the opposite of that, where students have some flexibility for whatever language they want to use, whatever grammar constructions, kind of whatever works for that task. Task-based learning often replicates real life, and the focus is often on the process or teamwork.
Yeah.
All right. Anything to add there, Jen?
Yeah, the language is not necessarily the focus. The focus is more on communication and everybody getting through the task together successfully, basically. In the way that you would communicate in real life. In real life, you don't have somebody with a clipboard saying, I'm not sure that's the perfect word that I would have chosen to fill in that blank. And also, you need to keep in mind your student's level of fluency when you're planning your task, because the more that the task requires like a cognitive load, like if it's something that is mentally challenging in their own language, then you need to have them be more fluent, or else that's going to take up kind of all of their brain power. So if you're asking students, like solving the problem of, human trafficking and modern slavery or whatever, if you've got students who are younger, or if they don't really have any real knowledge of the topic and they have to sort of learn all about it in order to discuss it, that's going to take kind of all of their brain power, and their language is going to suffer as a result.
Yeah, I would kind of say task-based learning, you can do it with beginners. We'll talk about some activities, like kind of some very simple things like matching, sorting, ordering, something like that. But to get kind of into the bigger task-based projects that might take like an entire class, I generally wouldn't do it with absolute beginners. I think they often need more structure, and they just actually don't have the language skills to complete most things kind of independently. So I would go kind of like at least high beginner and intermediate and advanced. Actually, this is more when I would use like full-on task-based classes for them. So
yeah, exactly. Just in the way that, when you're teaching anything to your students, if they're really beginners, you're going to do so much scaffolding and so much you really have to have more of those filling in the blank kind of activities, just because they don't have the rest of the language at their disposal. So task-based learning may be a little bit frustrating for everybody involved if you tried to do it, which is a shame, because it is a great way to get students to use the language in a useful way. Unfortunately, if they don't have the language at their disposal to use, then it's probably not going to work too well.
Everything has a place for sure,
Yes.
depending on the level and the age and all those things. So let's get into why consider using task-based learning. So the first reason I have is that it's very student-centered. So I consider in this kind of lesson the teacher to be a guide, not a guru. So the teacher is not the all-knowing guru who just kind of like transmits their knowledge of English or a language to the students. The teacher is more of a guide, kind of like can help students, assisting them. They can answer questions. And of course, the teacher sets up the task, does that heavy lifting at the beginning, but then kind of turns it over to the students and lets them do it. And student-centered classes, I think, actually have the potential to to help students learn the most effectively, to actually know some language as opposed to like a very teacher-centered class. I think it's not that easy for students to actually be able to use language at the end of that kind of class. So yeah, and what's the next thing, Jen?
Um, yeah, as I said before, I just kind of got a bit out of order. It is, focusing on the meaning and the communication that's necessary for teamwork or project work, or if it's a presentation, even if they may have worked on it alone, they're then having to communicate with their classmates in a meaningful way. And it's all about being understood and making themselves understood rather than using a specific grammar pattern or a specific set of vocabulary that they may have been taught at some point.
Yeah, because like if someone's at the airport or a bank in, say, Canada or the US or whatever, or like one of our students, and they just have to do a task, they have to get through immigration, they have to like set up a bank account, whatever they need to do. I mean, honestly, that person at immigration or the bank isn't judging that person on, oh, they made a little grammar mistake here. That wasn't the exact right word that they chose. If that student can get that task done kind of without a lot of stress and just kind of reasonably efficiently, and the person can just understand everything they want, or, they get everything that out of that transaction that they need. They got through immigration, they got the bank account, then I think it's good enough. It doesn't have to be the exact right thing at
Yeah.
every sentence they speak. So I like the focus on communication and just making sure that they can be understood in some way using their language capabilities that they have.
Yes, because that is success in real world communication.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then I also like it because students have freedom to learn what they want to learn. So whenever I set up like the bigger task-based learning projects, I give my students some degree of, or actually a lot of degree of like flexibility. And I'll kind of get into that like in a poster presentation and my thing about like the news, talking about a news article. So yeah, students can kind of focus on their own choices for things. And I mean, I like having choices in
Yes.
life. I don't like when someone just tells me exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it. I don't like that. And I think our students don't either all the time. Sometimes, of course, it's necessary if you're teaching a class, and but it doesn't always have to be like that. So I like that this is a bit of a change from that usual thing.
Yeah. And obviously, that really raises their interest if they are going to be doing something that focuses on an interest that they actually have. So whatever the form of the task is, if there's a way to let the students tailor it according to their own wants and needs, then that's going to really increase their motivation to give it their all.
And I also think task-based learning can appeal to various learning styles. So I think the kind of traditional way that the teacher lectures and the students listen, some people take in auditory information super easily. Other people are absolutely not like that. So I just think this is kind of just a more flexible way to do it. And students are kind of free to get information through whatever method kind of works for them. So I like that.
Yes.
All right. Anything else for why use task-based teaching, Jen?
I don't think so. I think it's great in a lot of situations. There's no one size fits all type of lesson or type of activity, but this one is a pretty good one.
Okay, so let's jump into how to plan a lesson. So there are a few basic steps. So the first one is the pre-task, so giving some instructions about how to do the activity. And I think Jen maybe just briefly touched on it in the beginning. Just do it at an appropriate level for your
Yeah.
students, obviously. You don't want to overwhelm them with like too much and too complicated. So just really consider carefully exactly what students have to do and how you can explain it in the most clear way possible. And then some people divide these next two into two separate things, but I generally don't. So students do the task, which involves planning. I don't really see a difference between doing the task and then planning. Um, it seems
I thi-
weird to me that people separate them. I don't know, Jen, what
well,
do you think about that?
I think it depends on the age of your students that you may need to break things down into smaller pieces. So
Mhm.
it's all sort of what your students are cognitively capable of doing. That
Mhm.
doesn't really have to do with the language itself. It's more of their ability to break down an activity or a task in their daily life, even into the constituent parts to get it correctly done.
Mhm. That does make sense. Yeah. If they're younger, you might have to kind of walk them through it more step by step than, say, like adults or university students who can kind of just handle a bit of ambiguity and a bit of figuring things out on their own. So then the next step is doing a report or a little presentation to the class. So, yeah, that's kind of self-explanatory, I think. And then the final step is some feedback. So this could be feedback from the teacher. It could be like maybe the teacher just orally gives some feedback or a little like written form or something, or you could get the other students to give feedback somehow. So those are kind of just the very basic, um, yeah, the steps in a task-based lesson plan.
Yeah. And again, this is one of those things where kids can be mean if you're going to do feedback. Um, I kind of like having a form that the students can complete, but then it's given to the teacher, and the teacher can selectively include constructive information in their feedback to the student of what
Mm.
everyone who watched it or experienced their uh, task, whether it was a report or presentation or video or whatever they did. Yeah. So then you can delete the troll comments, if you will,
A bit of
without
censoring
without the
is
students
good.
having to know about
Yeah.
it. But if you've got older students, then that may not be an issue.
Yes. Well, on the other hand, like I did a presentation class in Korea at a university, and it was actually a pass-fail class, which was kind of nice. So just as long as students showed up and did the speeches, then they would pass the class basically. Like so it kind of took the pressure off them just to perform and like, care so much about grades. But anyway, so students did their presentations, and then I'd always have like at the end of each presentation, like 2 or 3 minutes of the class giving feedback to that person. And I kind of showed them how to do it. Like, don't just say that was terrible, or just say, like, I taught them you could improve on this, or like you could have been a little bit better at this, or you didn't make eye contact with me, or just something like that. And then also I showed them like how to give positive feedback. Like, that was really interesting, or like, it was so funny, or like I learned a lot and things like that. And it was actually so cute. It was my favorite part of the class when students would give each other feedback. And they were actually so good at it by the end that I almost didn't give feedback myself. I just let the students kind of just do that. And yeah, I mean, I think they really enjoyed it. And like everybody was listening so intently to all the presentations just because they knew that they would have to give feedback. So it can work depending on the group of students that you have for sure.
Yeah. And I will say, even if they're just given a rubric that you collect and you just throw in a trash can when they leave the room, if you have something for them to do, if all of the listeners have a task while they're listening, they will listen a lot more attentively.
Oh, a reason to listen is the key to all listening things you will ever do in your class.
Yeah. So
Yes, that is so true.
if if you don't have the time or the bandwidth as a teacher to go through all of the students' feedback for all of the students' presentations, and you also don't want them to give live feedback that you can't control what's going to come out of their mouths and you're maybe not sure how it's going to go. I would suggest still just giving them forms, even if it's just performative for their own sakes, and you're not going to do anything with it, because if they think that they have to listen and that's part of their grade, they will listen a lot more closely.
Yeah, and I actually for that class that I mentioned before, I for like we had a midterm exam speech and a final exam speech, and I would get all the other students graded each other. So, but it was like a pass fail class. So I mean, of course, like everybody was going to pass, but like they graded each other, and it was like people were so serious about it. And like they got really intense about it, and like were listening and like writing little comments to each other, and like of course it was anonymous, so like I didn't, you know, the people grading it didn't have to write their names on it, but I would like collect all the papers, just double check to make sure there was nothing too crazy or nothing really mean. And then I would actually give those papers to the student that did the presentation, and they kind of had like this honest feedback from their peers. And yeah, it actually went really well. And I don't know, it was such a good class. I actually missed that. It was, yeah, it was a fun time for sure. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that class. But
It was really good. You could even add a layer on that you're grading the graders on their
yeah, you could.
good
You
feedback.
could. Yes, it's a whole world of things you could do
Yes,
with
a
that for
task
sure.
within a task within a task.
Yes, it's true. All right, so let's get into some of the
Yeah.
kind of the classic task-based activities that teachers might want to do. So the first one is just tasks can be small. They don't always have to be like super big in a full class lesson. They can be like a little 5 or 10 minute activity. So just some simple things to do are like listing, ordering, sorting, comparing, matching. And this just often even happens in like, say, the textbook that you're using, like Four Corners or WorldLink or whatever. There's often kind of these things, especially for like vocabulary, new vocabulary. So yeah, it can just be like a simple task that students have to complete. And then the next one that I had is planning a trip for someone. So one thing I did in my class that was really successful, when we were talking about like travel and holidays, it was in the unit in one of my textbooks. And so I would just say, okay, my parents are coming to Korea. And then I would give a, show my parents' picture on the PowerPoint, and then like give some information like they're this old, they don't really like spicy food, they like walking, but not for like 10 kilometers. And like my mom likes shopping and whatever. So then I would put students into groups of 3 or 4, and they had to plan a little trip for my parents. And then like they had to consider who my parents were and their knowledge of Korea. And then they had to do a little presentation, and they had to convince me that that was the trip that I would choose for my parents. And yeah, they had a lot of freedom just to kind of go, whatever direction they wanted with it. And it was a really fun activity. Students just really enjoyed it. And I always got like so many different vacation plans for my parents. So it was actually quite interesting to listen to everybody's ideas.
Yeah, that's a really good one, because then everybody can kind of show their own knowledge and expertise, like what
Mm.
they think would be the best, however many days for people who have never been to Korea before and may never be back again. Like, what
Mhm.
are the absolute must-sees within the parameters that you've given of their physical capabilities? And, they don't like spicy food, so, they aren't going to go do a food tour in Korea, you know.
They're not going to go to Chuncheon and eat all the duck galbi for
Oh,
sure.
they
It would
missed
be like
out.
a nightmare. Yes. And then students would like ask me questions about my parents, like additional questions. They wanted more information, and it was just like funny. I don't know. I just found it really cute. Like
Yeah,
they were always quite serious about it whenever I
yeah.
did this
And
activity.
yeah, so some alternatives to planning a trip, because I think planning a trip is a really common task-based activity, but it can be any kind of event like that where there's going to be differing opinions. So you could have them plan a class outing, or you could have them plan a birthday party. But in the way that Jackie had the trip be for her parents, you can give them somebody to plan the party for. So, you're planning a party for, your 6-year-old sister or niece, or, you're planning a party. It's an office party for your boss, whatever. You can make it a little more challenging than just plan a birthday party. And with a group event, obviously you can put parameters on, the transportation, the budget, the time of day that it could be done, whatever kind of parameters you want to put on it. So then that kind of limits them in some ways, but it makes it easier in other ways because it knocks out, they don't have the limited possibilities of everything in the world, which may just cause some paralysis in your groups.
Yeah, it's good to give some kind of guidance. It's like task-based activities are generally quite open and open-ended, but that can also be overwhelming. And if you, I've made that mistake before, and students just didn't know what to do because there were too many choices. So I like to limit a little bit in this example by like budget, number of days, whatever, something like that. So, yeah. All right, the next one that I want to talk about are presentations. So presentations are kind of a classic one. So just in my classes, I've done two kind of styles. So one of them was kind of for my higher level students. So, and they did a poster presentation. So I got students to like, I think I made them choose a problem facing our world. So it was like quite vague. So it was like maybe animal extinction, global warming, food insecurity, like pollution, hunger, I don't know, whatever. Like all there was so people chose so many different things. So they had to make a little poster about it. And then they had to do a presentation on it. So I got students to give like a very brief overview of what the problem is, and then a few different solutions. And then I think I had a very quick Q&A at the end. And yeah, it was actually really fun. Students did such a good job of it. And the other one I did was what's in the news. So I would have students like choose a news article. So this was when I was in Korea. So it could be like from a Korean newspaper, or it could be from like BBC, whatever, something in the world. So just whatever that was. And then they gave them, I think, three things. So the first thing was like just explain briefly what the article was about, and then talk about why it was or why it's important to consider or to think about, and then what they personally think about it, give their opinion about it. And those presentations were so good. I mean, I actually loved it. And it was such an interesting, I think I did it over two classes. They were such interesting classes. And yeah,
Yeah.
students had so much freedom. And I also really enjoyed it, taking a break from talking all the time.
Yeah, and that's a really good one. And that was a good point that you touched on there, that um, the gathering of information for the task does not have to be in English. They can use their first language. So you could, instead of doing what's in the news, they could interview someone. They could do like an oral history type of activity where they're talking to an elderly person, or, a grandparent or whatever. Or they could, if these are students, they could go interview someone who works in the field in their major and ask them, whatever, a day in the life of an engineer or whatever. And they can do all that in their first language, and then the presentation is still in English. So they're still getting that language use in the communication, to meet the goals of the task, but they don't have to do it from start to finish in English.
Yes, that is very true. Yeah, I didn't set any limits or anything like that. I assumed that students would probably do research in their first language, and
Yeah.
that's okay as long as like everything else is in English then. And obviously it's a challenge in itself to like take all these, talking about global warming, and you're reading an article in Korean, or you're getting some information in Korean and then translating that to English. I mean, that's not an easy task. And honestly, it would have been easier probably if students just got information in English about it, you know what I mean? Instead of like having to translate. So yeah, I just thought just be resourceful, and it doesn't matter. I didn't actually care either way about that. So all right. So the next one that I have is just one question. So this is something that can be done in class. So this is often what I would do if I was like, say, talking about a holiday like Valentine's Day or Christmas or something. So this is a bit of a survey activity. So I would get students, I'd put them into pairs, and they would have to I would always get students to maybe think of like 5 interesting questions that they could ask, say, about Christmas. So like just opinion questions, like would you rather have turkey or ham for like Christmas dinner, or like would you rather open your presents on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or just something. So just kind of whatever is culturally appropriate for where you're teaching those questions might not necessarily be appropriate in Korea, but you can kind of make it work for whatever. Students will know that they'll come up with good questions. And then that group, they choose one question out of those ones that they list. And then I make sure that every group has a different question. And then once that's done, students have to like get a pen and paper and stand up and then go talk to other people in the class, other pairs. So one person is kind of the interviewer, and then the other one records the information. So just asking people about their one question, and then they write down a bunch of answers. And I say, okay, you have to interview at least 10 people. At the end of that time, students sit down and then they compile kind of a like report about what they found. And I give students some vocabulary, like most people or some people, a few people, nobody, etc. So they would say like everybody thinks that blah blah blah, and some people think that etc. So they would give a little report to the class. And then yeah, so that's just kind of a simple thing that you can do within a class very easily that doesn't involve homework or like a bunch of outside resources or whatever.
Or a bunch of preparation from the teacher.
Yes, it's very actually almost no prep. So if you're like stuck and you don't have a plan, but you have a bunch of students looking at you, this is something that can take up an entire class quite easily. And it's actually student-centered, kind of fun. You can like choose a theme, whatever. So yeah, it's a nice one. All right, Jen, you have a few more things here for us.
Yes. I added a few on. You could have the students do a podcast or video or a blog project according to their interests and also whatever technical equipment that you have access to or don't have access to. I mean, these days, pretty much everybody's going to have a phone that they could use to record audio or video, or they could type out a blog post on whatever. But some possible topics would be like cooking or recipes. So you could have like a class blog where everyone contributes their favorite holiday recipe, which you could do as like a double task where the first part of the task is interviewing their mom or their grandmother or somebody like how to make some specific recipe, and then they turn that into an English recipe, and you would need to show them what recipes look like in English, or even what recipes look like maybe if they've never looked up a recipe or used a recipe themselves. Or you could have them do something with current events, and that could be news or politics, sports, celebrity gossip, like whatever is of interest to them. And that could be a blog or a podcast or a video where they are just discussing some topic, sort of like the what's in the news topic that Jackie has done. You could have them do product reviews. So they could just pull something out of the bag that they have with them in class and review that product. They like their pen or they don't like it, because it was expensive and cute, but it doesn't actually write that well, or, whatever. So whatever the students enjoy in their outside lives, like if they are really into TikTok, well then, find some kind of TikTok that uses language and isn't just, a dance that they're doing. Or, if they like watching cooking videos, maybe you can't do a cooking video in the class, but, you could have them, look for a recipe that they could do on their own time. And if the class lends itself to it, you could even have them do a video, create the video at home and then show it in class. They could interview each other. They could, do a reaction video, whatever. I mean, you can really go wild with the ideas of what your students can do that is just related to the things that they enjoy doing in real life. They just have to do it in English.
That actually reminds me of one of the best homework projects that I ever did. It was in a conversation class for Korean university students, and the unit in the textbook was on etiquette. So like etiquette in various situations. So the homework assignment was they could do it alone or they could do it with like I think I said up to 3 people, and just go to a certain place. So people went to a coffee shop, a bar, the subway, I don't know, like wherever, and they made these like little videos talking about etiquette. So some students did like the drinking culture in Korea and like what's rude and like how you have to use two hands to pour your drink and accept your drink and like all those things. And honestly, the videos were so funny and so cute. And I just really enjoyed like seeing students' personalities, I guess. Kind of just outside the class, just in whatever place they're kind of familiar with. Some people did it like in a dormitory at the library. Like there was a whole variety of situations. And yeah, they were some of my favorite videos actually. And I just, yeah, really enjoyed watching them. And I think I gave everyone like 100% as long as they did it. So I didn't grade it like super seriously. It was just kind of like for a fun little thing to do outside class. And I also did videos where people had to like interview one of their classmates or someone who spoke English well and like ask them, I forget like about their, best vacation. We were talking about like the simple past, vacation, something like that. So yeah, making videos for like conversation classes is a gold mine. For sure for homework assignments. And yeah, it's a really just nice task-based activity. Okay, so I think that kind of might finish off our discussion on task-based learning. I have a book you can find on Amazon, 39 task-based language teaching and learning activities. And I also talk a ton about like how to plan a lesson, why consider task-based learning, etc., all the good stuff. So you can find also this podcast information at eslactivities.org/podcast. And yeah, be sure to leave us a review wherever you like to listen to this podcast. We'd really appreciate it. Okay.
Five-star review.
Anything else from you, Jen?
No, I would say just if you haven't done task-based learning before, please give it a try. I think your students might surprise you because they really get into task-based activities in a way that they may not be excited about other textbook-based activities.
Yes, it's different, just different and interesting. So yeah, give it a go, but then also plan.
Yes.
Maybe more than you think you need to plan. It's not so easy, just like do this, and everyone just looks at you confused. So like maybe over plan this one for the first couple times that you do it, just until you get a bit more experience with it. That's my advice, my last advice.
And break it down further than you may think it needs to be broken down. Like really think about every single step. Like if you were telling somebody how to get dressed, and you can't just say, put on your pants and put on your shirt. You have to be like, open the shirt and put one arm through the matching sleeve or whatever. You really have to break it down, especially if they have not done task-based learning before. But it's worth it.
For sure. Yeah, give it a try. Okay, and I think that's it. We'll catch you next time, everyone. Bye.
Next time. Bye.